Your Excellency, President Paul Kagame of the Republic of Rwanda, Your Excellency, President Pierre Nkurunziza of the Republic of Burundi, Your Excellency, Prime Minister Guillaume Soro of Côte d'Ivoire, Your Excellency, Minister Yusuf Ouedraogo, Special Advisor to the President of the African Development Bank, Your Excellency Judy Chang, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, representing the Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellencies, invited guests, ministers representing your countries, the diplomatic corps from New York to Kigali and in between, leaders of this country and invited countries at different levels, dear participants, it is a great honor for Rwanda today to be hosting this meeting on what it takes to rebuild a nation after conflict. So today and tomorrow, we will be sharing experience. We'll be talking about peace and stability, then rebuilding nations at different stages of our nation's journeys. We will inform each other, we will share experience and talk about our challenges as well. And then at the end of the meeting tomorrow, midday, we want to come up with some recommendations that this meeting will then submit to the custody of the United Nations Peacebuilding Commission to use with countries and situations as appropriate, making sure that they are availed widely, the United Nations being our common holder and guarantor of peace and security. It's only fitting that the Kigali recommendations at the end of the conference tomorrow will be going to the United Nations Peacebuilding Commission. A special welcome to Peacebuilding Commission representatives here from New York who have been working on a number of countries trying to help them get back on track, and also to representatives of our invited and brother nations from across Africa. The genesis of this meeting, Your Excellencies and dear participants, lies with the UN Peacebuilding Commission, whose chair for this year, 2011, is Rwanda. It also has to do with some of the strides this country has made in the last 17 years. Our country, again, is very pleased to both host this gathering and put its road to recovery at the disposal of other nations, with which we share a sad history of extreme violence and destabilization, but more importantly, with which we share our ambition to transform our nations into peaceful and prosperous countries. We also want to avoid other countries some of the growing pains that we have gone through as a nation. Your Excellencies, this conference is divided into three parts. In a moment, we will start with the opening plenary, and the theme is leadership. So we want to hear from you, various leaders of countries and institutions, what it takes to lead a country in times of trouble, and especially to plan for a sustainable stability and development. Tomorrow we have two sessions starting in the morning. The first one on innovative approaches to nation building, followed by a session on aid coordination, and a closing session, a brief closing session before lunch on the outcome of the deliberations of these 2 days and the way forward for this Kigali meeting on reconstruction. And of course, tonight we will be treated to a gala dinner offered by His Excellency President Paul Kagame with Rwandan songs and dance from the old days. I wish to thank the UN Peacebuilding Commission and the African Development Bank, our co-organizers of this event, for the hard work they have put into the success of this meeting. Finally, I wish to call on a distinguished journalist and expert in world affairs, somebody who follows Africa very closely, Zainab Badawi, who will be the conductor of the discussions both this afternoon and throughout the day tomorrow. Zainab, I pass the baton to you.
That's for the French. My French is not up to it. I'm sorry, Your Excellency, President. Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, Mr. Presidents, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed, Minister Louise. I've had the pleasure of meeting you before, but I've got to know you better today over lunch. I am really, really not only delighted but honoured to be amongst you for this very, very important gathering. As somebody who was born under an African sun, unfortunately in a country which has known more than its fair share of conflict over the last decades, the Sudan, now I should say the Sudan as opposed to South Sudan, I am taking a very keen personal interest in this because, like so many people from the Sudan, we wish to see both parts of this great, wonderful country have the future that its people deserve. And as we see from so many countries around the world, and in particular as my work as a reporter all over the world, not only in the continent of Africa, I see that it's not easy to emerge from post-conflict situations and to build a nation that's worthy of that word in any meaningful way. It is a tribute to the people of Rwanda and the government and leaders of Rwanda, but very much so the people, for showing the rest of the world in a way how to do it. I've been to countries post-conflict where there are still huge divisions, but it would seem from my very brief encounter so far here in Rwanda that they really do have something not only to teach the continent of Africa, but the whole world. And you know, so often it's easy for us to say African solutions for African problems, but in this regard, Rwanda really has got plenty to share with other countries on the continent, including my own country. And I would hope that this is what will emerge after a couple of days of discussion, that we will not only see what the leadership can do, but also how to engage people at all strata of society. And I think what Rwanda, for me, the main lesson is that it has applied African solutions to finding a way to building a nation after conflict, integrating traditional African practices and ways, which is absolutely vital. And you know, my father is an old freedom fighter in the Sudan. He was involved in the colonial struggle against the British and was imprisoned for 3.5 years during the fight for independence. And he's now, luckily, still with us in his mid-80s. And he has always said to me that the way for Africa is to integrate our wonderful traditions and not just wait for an imposition of other people's values on our own. And it is for that reason that I'm very glad, Mr. President Paul Kagame of Rwanda, that I'm here to share and learn from your experiences. As the Minister said, we begin this session with some introductory comments from our keynote speakers here, but you're also going to do more than just sit and listen. So I'd like you all, there are many representatives of various countries and multilateral organisations and civil society organisations. I'd like you to be involved. You've all got a microphone on the table. Just press that red button and we will hear you. So after we've heard our introductory speeches, I would like to have some kind of dialogue. Panel, is that all right with you as well? You'll share and interact with our audience. Thank you. Our first speaker is Yusuf Ouedraogo, who is the Special Advisor to Donald Kaberuka, the head of the African Development Bank. Yusuf Ouedraogo has served as both Foreign Minister and Prime Minister in his native Burkina Faso until 2007 when he joined the African Development Bank. He is a specialist in marketing, studied both in France and in the United States, and he is going to kick off by setting the scene for us by giving us a continent-wide vision on the importance of peace building in post-conflict societies. And coming from the bank, of course, we'll focus a bit on the money issue, on how you can just make sure that aid works effectively. So, Yusuf Ouedraogo, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Your Excellency Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, distinguished Head of State and Government, honorable ministers, eminent personalities, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor and privilege for me to speak before this August Assembly on behalf of the President of the African Development Bank, Dr. Donald Kaberuka. So I would first like, Mr. President Kagame, to thank you and the government of Rwanda for having the initiative to host this important meeting and associating the African Development Bank. Indeed, post-conflict countries pose special challenges by virtue of the sheer scale and range of their needs. Restoring security and basic services for ordinary people, delivering dividend of peace, such as jobs and basic services, or to prevent former rebels from going back to the bush, restoring roads and bridges, as well as bonds between former enemies, or giving people a voice in the new society that may be emerging. Everything is a priority. Such challenges are in sharp contrast to the often limited capacity of this country to use international aid, depleted human capital and lost generation, dysfunctional institution, poor or outdated policies, and sometimes difficult access to areas beyond the main city are all contributing factors. Nevertheless, there is a need for strict prioritization. With the right leadership and system in place, Rwanda has demonstrated that it can be done. Excellencies, distinguished guests, providing rapid, flexible, and risk-accepting financing to situation of fragility is critical. It is critical to ensure both life-saving activities as well as peace dividend and livelihood support, and to start building the foundation for sustainable recovery, peace, and state capacities. The international community has so far faced major challenges in providing such effective and targeted support to countries recovering from conflict. The challenges to effective transition financing are many. Sometimes, the fluidity of the transition context means that short-term priorities and firefighting could often take precedent over long-term planning. Improving the effectiveness of institutions is the topmost concern in the rebuilding and reconstruction phase. Improving the coordination of capacity development support through increased use of pooled funding mechanisms and strengthening national capacity for managing capacity development support can deliver better results. Improving the effectiveness and the harmonization of planning instruments, for example, strategic plans and frameworks and processes, and ensuring that they are based on integrated and well-sequenced peace-building and state-building objectives remain a key challenge for national and international actors. Comprehensive political dialogue and leadership will be necessary to ensure that development aid can be channeled where it is needed and in the way it is best delivered. Realizing broader peace-building and state-building objectives requires parallel efforts in strengthening local mechanisms to resolve and prevent conflicts, to develop inclusive political settlements, and to strengthen state-society relations. Political dialogue processes can contribute to this interconnected objective. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the eruption of political discontent in North Africa has especially revealed pressure that have been building below the surface, resulting from a volatile mixture of economic and social exclusion, youth unemployment, dissatisfaction with governance failures, and the lack of genuine democracy. Within the framework of country leadership, there is much that African development could be doing to promote an inclusive growth agenda, taking in account these challenges. The bank has a role to play in making its member countries more aware of the pressure that are building and engage them in dialogue on how those pressure can be managed through broad-based and inclusive development processes. The bank will scale up its support for the creation of capable and accountable institutions in such countries. Like for others before, our recent support to the political dialogue in South Sudan demonstrated the bank's will to back its financial commitment to the rebuilding and reconstruction processes of conflict-affected countries in the continent. Commitment to stop conflict, build nation, and end poverty through more effective collaboration between national and international partners is now a shared value and vision. This new deal for engagement in fragile state calls for improved way of working together. We will not be able to declare success in fighting global poverty until we effectively address the challenges of fragile and conflict-affected countries, which are set to miss the Millennium Development Goals. The transition from this, which they have to go, will require a different type of engagement to deliver rapid and transformative result. With such common commitment, change is possible. From the bank side, we came here to learn more, to listen carefully to you, because this bank is the Bank of Africa, and this bank, his mandate is to work for Africa. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Yusuf Wadaraga, and especially for your last words reminding us about how important it is to have a lack of conflict before you can secure any kind of progress in development. Our next speaker is Judy Cheng Hopkins, who is a specialist in international affairs, but she is currently Assistant Secretary General for UN Peacebuilding Support. She has had a long and distinguished career at the United Nations, spanning 30 years, including a 10-year stint working in the field in Africa. She also was Assistant Commissioner, High Commissioner for Refugees, working in particular to develop policies on internally displaced people and refugees, and also had a stint working with the World Food Programme in Asia and in Europe. And Judy Cheng Hopkins is going to talk to us about the very important work that they are doing at the United Nations, supporting countries in peace building. Judy Cheng Hopkins, thank you.
Thank you. Your Excellency, President Paul Kagame, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. I have the honor to deliver a speech on behalf of the Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, today. I thank His Excellency, President Paul Kagame of Rwanda and the African Development Bank for hosting this important event on post-conflict peace building. Peace building involves addressing some of the most sensitive issues facing a given society, issues that have previously proved so charged and intractable that they led to violent conflict. The peace-building efforts of the United Nations are an essential tool in preventing the recurrence of large-scale violence. We carry out this work in a sustained and in-depth fashion, and we focus on all the cornerstones of enduring peace, from the restoration of security to the delivery of essential services, from effective, accountable governance to respect for human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. The venue for today's discussion speaks volumes. Rwanda suffered one of the most violent conflicts of the 20th century, yet has since become one of the world's top 20 performers in progress towards the Millennium Development Goals. Since the 1990s, infant mortality has been halved, and primary school enrollment has increased from 68% to over 96%. These achievements are the result of a combination of strong national ownership and leadership, local solutions, constructive ties with donors, and the empowerment of talented individuals to implement priority poverty reduction programs. Rwanda's representation of women in government is also noteworthy. Rwanda's major gains, as well as the significant challenges the country still faces, can offer valuable lessons for other post-conflict countries engaged in peace building and state building. The United Nations will continue to be Rwanda's partner as the country continues along this path. The engagement of the United Nations peace-building efforts around the world continues to deepen and grow. I wish to congratulate Ambassador Eugene Richard Gasana, Rwanda's permanent representative to the United Nations, on a productive year as chair of the Peacebuilding Commission, and thank him for having initiated this high-level event today. The Commission has a clear goal to help countries emerging from conflict make an irreversible transition from war to peace. To do this, we seek to bring all relevant national and international stakeholders to the table. In Africa, such as international partners routinely include the ADB, the African Union, the OECD, the World Bank, and the full range of UN peacekeeping operations, political missions, agencies, funds, and programs. I welcome the recent establishment in the ADB of a finance facility for fragile states. The World Bank's recent World Development Report, issued earlier this year on the links between conflict, security, and development, has prompted lively and relevant discussions. I have also been encouraged by the formation of the G7+ group of fragile and conflict-affected states. This initiative has the potential to push forward necessary reforms that can improve donor coordination and aid effectiveness, and I urge Rwanda and other countries to support it. Looking ahead, we must do more to strengthen the impact of peace building. This means better partnerships, greater agility, decisive support for peace processes, and empowering women. We must also ensure adequate financial assistance, including through the Peacebuilding Fund. Let us all do our utmost to translate global commitments to peace building into life, enhancing reality on the ground. Let us work with all partners to help countries put violence before them once and for all. I reiterate my gratitude to President Kagame for hosting us and for sharing the Rwanda experience, and wish the participants every success. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Judy Cheng Hopkins. Okay, so our third speaker is, like me, a parent of 4 children, something we have in common. The Prime Minister of Côte d'Ivoire, Guillaume Soro, not a stranger to controversy. He was head of the Federation of Students in Côte d'Ivoire, a tremendous activist, suffered imprisonment as a result of his activism, and also went to France, unusually, to study the English language, but there we go. You can explain that to us, Prime Minister. And then went back briefly in 1999, only to leave again because of the events in 2000 in Côte d'Ivoire, but then went back, became Minister of Communications in 2003, and then, of course, under President Alassane Ouattara, is now the Prime Minister. So, obviously, Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, as I like to say in English, sorry. That's what we call it at the BBC. Anyway, Côte d'Ivoire is now obviously a country that a lot of people are very interested in, emerging from a very difficult situation. And so, Prime Minister, please, the floor is yours.
Excellences, Monsieur le Président de la République du Rwanda, Excellences, Monsieur le Président de la République du Burundi, Madame la représentante du secrétaire général des Nations Unies, Monsieur le représentant du président de la Banque africaine de développement, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Mesdames et Messieurs, mes premiers mots vont tout naturellement à l'endroit du président Paul Kagame, président de la République du Rwanda, à l'endroit du gouvernement et du peuple frère du Rwanda, afin de leur traduire notre profonde gratitude pour la remarquable hospitalité dont la délégation qui m'accompagne et moi-même sommes l'objet depuis notre arrivée dans cette belle ville de Kigali. Je voudrais vous transmettre les salutations chaleureuses de votre frère et ami, le président Alassane Dramane Ouattara, avec qui vous étiez en ligne il y a seulement quelques jours. Je voudrais enfin exprimer les sentiments de sincère et profonde gratitude des populations vivantes en Côte d'Ivoire à l'endroit du gouvernement et du peuple rwandais qui, sous votre conduite, Monsieur le Président, ont apporté leur soutien franc et sans aucune ambiguïté au camp de la légitimité dans lequel nous étions lors de la crise ivoirienne. Monsieur le Président, ma délégation se réjouit de pouvoir prendre part à cette importante conférence et surtout de l'occasion qu'elle lui offre de s'informer à la source de l'expérience post-crise du Rwanda, qui demeure une référence de réussite en la matière. Comme vous le savez, la crise dans mon pays a fait plus de 3000 morts, 1 million de déplacés internes et 500 000 réfugiés. Ce bilan aurait été plus élevé n'eût été l'adoption de la résolution 1975 par le Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies qui a octroyé un mandat plus robuste à l'opération des Nations Unies en Côte d'Ivoire, l'autorisant ainsi à détruire les armes lourdes utilisées pour massacrer les populations civiles vivant en Côte d'Ivoire. C'est pourquoi, et vous comprendrez, que la Côte d'Ivoire exprime son admiration à l'égard du Rwanda et de son président pour l'engagement à protéger les populations civiles dans des situations de danger. Monsieur le Président, sitôt la guerre terminée en Côte d'Ivoire, notre gouvernement a dû faire face à l'insécurité et à la gestion de l'assistance humanitaire. Aujourd'hui, c'est-à-dire quelques 6 mois après la fin de la crise, des progrès notables peuvent être constatés. Il s'agit notamment du retour à la normalisation du pays à travers la sécurisation progressive de l'ensemble du territoire, de la relance des activités économiques, de la gratuité des soins dans les hôpitaux, de l'achèvement des cours dans les écoles, marqué par le déroulement normal des examens et concours, du paiement régulier des salaires des fonctionnaires et agents de l'État, du démarrage des travaux d'infrastructures, notamment la construction du 3e pont et de la tranche de la centrale thermique de production électrique d'Azito. Par ailleurs, le train de la réconciliation nationale est bien lancé sous la direction de l'ancien Premier ministre Charles Konabani, président de la Commission Dialogue, Vérité, Réconciliation. L'ordre constitutionnel sera complètement et définitivement restauré par la tenue d'élections législatives transparentes et libres prévues le 11 décembre 2011. Monsieur le Président, ce bilan, bien que quelque peu satisfaisant, ne nous fait pas perdre de vue des défis tout aussi importants qui se dressent devant nous, notamment la réforme du secteur de sécurité, qui ne peuvent être efficacement résolus que sur le moyen et le long terme et qui ne peuvent être entrepris sérieusement qu'avec la coopération des organisations internationales et l'assistance multiforme des pays amis et notamment le Rwanda. C'est pourquoi cette conférence sur la consolidation de la paix post-conflit vient à point nommé, dans la mesure où les nombreux et fructueux échanges qui nous a été donné d'avoir depuis notre arrivée ici à Kigali ont considérablement élargi notre perception et notre compréhension de la problématique de la sécurité. Ainsi, nous reconnaissons que l'appropriation nationale de la question de la sécurité demeure un élément essentiel pour la réussite d'une telle entreprise. C'est du reste, en ce qui nous concerne, ce que dit la résolution 2000 du Conseil de sécurité qui renouvelle pour une année supplémentaire la présence de l'ONUCI en Côte d'Ivoire jusqu'au 31 juillet 2012. Nous comprenons également qu'une approche globale et intégrée de la sécurité est susceptible de mieux prendre en compte la spécificité de notre situation. En effet, pour une entreprise de la sécurité effective dans notre pays, il est indispensable de considérer le cadre global constitué à la fois des objectifs suivants: désarmement, démobilisation et réinsertion, réunification de l'armée, réforme de la police et de la gendarmerie, réforme de la justice, réforme du système des prisons et des gardes pénitentiaires, réforme du système de sécurité sous-régional, création d'emplois pour les jeunes, tenue effective des élections législatives, progrès dans la réconciliation nationale. Comme on le voit, mesdames et messieurs, la réalisation des objectifs submentionnés met en mouvement des éléments qui interagissent entre eux, et la sécurité demeure un élément essentiel dans le cadre des efforts entrepris en vue de la stabilisation de la situation sécuritaire globale qui, à son tour, permettra l'accélération de la réalisation des objectifs dans les autres secteurs, notamment la relance économique. C'est pourquoi nous percevons la réussite de la sécurité comme le critère de performance qui autorise la présence des Nations Unies de passer harmonieusement de la configuration de maintien de la paix à la configuration de consolidation de la paix. Ce n'est pas encore, vous le savez, le cas de la Côte d'Ivoire, qui a plutôt besoin en ce moment de déployer une présence plus dissuasive en termes de maintien de la paix, notamment dans l'ouest de la Côte d'Ivoire, à la frontière avec le Libéria, théâtre d'activités récurrentes de mercenaires et de miliciens, semeurs de déstabilisation. Monsieur le Président, nous avons mis à profit notre présence chez vous ici pour nous informer sur l'expérience du Rwanda dans le domaine de la sécurité. Et je peux l'affirmer sans me tromper que nous sommes très impressionnés par tout ce que vous avez pu réaliser. Évidemment, nous souhaitons nous en imprégner. Dès notre retour en Côte d'Ivoire, nous ferons rapport au gouvernement en vue des actions à entreprendre pour concrétiser la coopération entre nos deux pays conformément aux engagements pris par vous-même et le président Ouattara lors de la 66e session de l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies. Monsieur le Président, ici à Kigali, vous me permettrez juste de saluer le représentant de la Banque africaine de développement et lui dire évidemment qu'à la lumière des résultats que je viens d'énoncer, je réitère la volonté de la Côte d'Ivoire de voir le siège de la BAD revenir dans sa capitale originelle. Enfin, à l'endroit de tous les donateurs multilatéraux et bilatéraux, particulièrement à la Banque mondiale, j'adresse les remerciements du peuple et du gouvernement de Côte d'Ivoire pour la sollicitude constante dont ils ont fait preuve et les dispositions favorables qu'ils continuent de démontrer en vue du redressement rapide de la Côte d'Ivoire. Je vous remercie.
I'm like up and down like a yo-yo this day today. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Prime Minister. Okay, our next speaker is the President of the Republic of Burundi, Pierre Nkurunziza, a man who describes himself as an enthusiastic sportsman, enjoys football and riding a bicycle, and indeed has brought his considerable sporting skills to the issue of government, but also on a more tragic note, a man who has personally experienced what it means to live in a conflict-ridden society. His father, who was an MP and became governor of 2 provinces, died in 1972 during that bout of ethnic violence in Burundi when the Western media said something like 300,000 Burundians died. He then subsequently lost 2 of his 2 siblings. He was one of 7 children in the ethnic violence in 1993. And he himself, in fact, in 95, when he was then a university lecturer, narrowly escaped an assassination attempt. So somebody who's very personally borne the brunt of the kind of issues that we are discussing. He was Minister of Good Governance in 2003, and then in 2005 became President of Burundi and was re-elected in 2010. So, Mr. President, please, we look forward to hearing what you have to say about the current situation in Burundi. Thank you.
Your Excellency, President of the Republic of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, Excellency Yom Soro, Prime Minister of the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire, Excellency, the representative of the UN Secretary General, Excellency, the representative of the African Development Bank, Excellencies, Ministers, distinguished participants, all protocol observed, ladies and gentlemen. I very much welcome this debate and sincerely congratulate the government of Rwanda, the African Development Bank, the UN Peacebuilding Commission, and anyone involved in organizing and hosting such a high-level event on post-conflict peace building. I have no doubt that this conference will not only be an opportunity to take this good inspiration from Rwanda's experience in addressing some of the critical challenges the country faced following the genocide in 1994, but also a golden occasion to share our respective experiences and information on peace building. In fact, although it's a fact that Rwanda's journey towards reconciliation, reconstruction and development is inspirational, I believe that the Burundian example that I am going to brief you on deserves consideration as well. But before continuing, we can say to our brothers and sisters in Rwanda, congratulations. Thank you very much. Murabagabo. Burundi is emerging from a dark past. In fact, since the independence in 1962, we have on numerous occasions experienced regional and ethnic confrontation coupled with poor governance, which led to a long civil war resulting in massive violations and disrespect of human rights. At times, Burundi has experienced political disturbances which culminated in the spoliation of people's right to preside over the destiny of their country. This is the case for years like 1965, 1969, 1972, 1988, and 1993. Despite all this, the years that the most marked and affected Burundians are those during which the country has experienced the wars, massacres, exile, and fleeing overnight and all day. During those dark years, barbarism invaded the hearts of many Burundians, particularly leaders and institutions. Social and political unrest resulted in the killing in 1993 of the first democratically elected president, Melchior Ndadaye, which reflects both refusal of democracy and the negative legacy of colonization. All those tragic events above mentioned affected the country's secular unity. Hatred took the place of compassion and forgiveness. Lies and defamation replaced truth. Divisions and segregation made Burundians forget their common heritage based on culture, common language, and togetherness. The range of negative consequences is not limited to the above. A multitude of Burundians were killed. Others were forced into exile. Their property was ransacked, looted, stolen, or spoiled. Infrastructure was destroyed, and the environment was also not spared. Experts on Burundi have shown that failure to find real solutions to the country's problems led to such a situation that the tragedies of a given period paved the way for other tragedies, and so on. It's a matter of fact, although efforts were made in adopting the Charter of National Unity in 1991, the commitment to the democratic principles in 1992, by the constitutional referendum, the tragedies that followed those events have shown that we were still very far, and that another step forward should be undertaken. That is why Burundians who gathered in Arusha for dialogue reached an agreement in August 2000, which shed light on important issues, and after many ceasefire agreements. May I take this opportunity to thank His Excellency late Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, who helped Burundi to start negotiations, and also the regional, led by His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, and the heads of state in the region, and especially His Excellency President Kagame, who played also a big role during the negotiations. The following can indeed be pointed out for illustration. In these agreements, Burundians agreed on the ultimate need for everyone to know the truth about what happened, and that everyone has the same reading of the history of Burundi in order to teach it the same way. We agreed also as unanimous in observing that in Burundi, the perpetrators and the victims of atrocities have been numerous, that tragedies have occurred in cycles with the same effect in the collective memory. Burundians became aware of the stark reality that cohabiting peacefully is a categorical imperative, and they expressed the idea to initiate a conciliation program. They also agreed that impunity has encouraged criminals' arrogance and disrespect of the law. They then agreed that the law must necessarily act above all. They also felt the need to reform and rehabilitate some institutions such as the administration, the judiciary, the army, and the police. Burundians are today very pleased with how the defense and the security forces have been reformed and rehabilitated so as they inspire confidence of all Burundians. We also welcome the fact that legislation has been revised and that Burundi has ratified international conventions related to good governance, strengthening democracy, and the respect for human rights. The Commission to Disarm the Civilian Population in partnership with UNDP showed that reductions of armed violence in 15 provinces of Burundi was up to almost 40% and affecting 91% of the population of the country in the months that followed the national campaign for voluntary surrender of weapons held by civilians. Together with the disarmament and the reintegration of combatants, the Commission for Disarmament collected more than 80,000 weapons which were removed from the civilian population. We can rejoice now to see how the people of Burundi have made progress in the positive change of mentalities and attitudes. It's indeed the very first time in the history of Burundi that institutions from the elections have ended their mandate and that their replacement is done through free and fair elections. As a result of the above taken steps, Burundi has regained peace and security and is now able to contribute to peace building and security consolidation elsewhere in the world. We have indeed been able to send our troops and observers on peacekeeping missions in countries such as Somalia, Haiti, Sudan, Chad, Central Africa, and Ivory Coast. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, peace building requires more than sensitizing for voluntary surrender of illegal weapons and disarmament of civil population. To this end, the government of Burundi has set up other mechanisms like the National Commission for Land and Other Assets, the National Independent Commission on Human Rights, the Ombudsman Institution, and the Preparatory Commission for Truth and the Reconciliation Commission, which will mark the final phase of the country's peace process next year. Furthermore, I firmly believe that the Vision 2025 for Burundi, which includes other planning tools such as the Strategic Framework for Action Against Poverty, the Millennium Development Goals, and the municipal plans for community development, will prove to be crucial for peace building. The vision is built around 8 pillars, which are good governance and the capacity building of the state, human resources, economic growth and the fight against poverty, regional integration, demography control, social cohesion, country planning, and urbanization and the partnership. To conclude those few remarks, I would like to use this platform to call upon the international community to lend us a helping hand in our pledge to consolidate lasting peace and security, not only for Burundi, but also for the world as a whole. Last but not least, the suffering of Burundi and Rwanda. The suffering of Rwandese and Burundians. As we are brothers and sisters, sharing almost the same history, must serve as a lesson to the humanity, so that we can rise as one and say never again. May God bless you. I thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. President. And our final panel speaker this afternoon is, of course, the President of our host nation, President Paul Kagame, somebody who needs little introduction, but since I've introduced the other speakers, Mr. President, I'll have to say a few words about you. And you may be flattered to know that recently I was in Nairobi and I met Kenneth Kaunda, former president of Zambia, and for somebody who was born in 1957, I was talking about Africa and current leaders, and he said, I think that young man in Rwanda is doing rather well. So somebody was born in October 1957, I would take that as a compliment. Anyway, Paul Kagame, of course, as most of you know, is Rwandan, but when he was 3 years old, he went into Uganda, fleeing pre-independence ethnic persecution here. He spent 30 years as a refugee in Uganda. He returned to Rwanda in 1990, where he led the Rwandan Patriotic Front. And then, of course, in 1994, he was appointed Vice President and also Minister of Defense, and then became President in 2000. And somebody who, of course, is very well known on the international scene. I think, Mr. President, you serve also on the UN Secretary General's Advisory Group on Millennium Development Goals, along with Spain's Jose Luis Zapatero, and also on the UN's International Telecommunications Union on the Broadband Commission with Mexico's Carlos Slim. So you keep very good company, clearly. Mr. President, we look forward to hearing your comments about the lessons of Rwanda in peace building and how to forge a future from a tragic and sad past. Thank you.
Your Excellency Pierre Nkurunziza, President of the Republic of Burundi, Right Honorable Guillaume Soro, Prime Minister of Côte d'Ivoire, leaders of our high institutions present here, Ms. Judy Chang Hopkins, UN Assistant Secretary General for Peace Building Support, Mr. Yusuf Ouedraogo, Special Assistant to the President of the African Union, Honorable Ministers, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. And to you, Zainab, thank you for availing yourself for this event. I could not think of a better person to be the moderator for the discussions of this event. Thank you very much. I am very pleased to welcome you all to Rwanda. It is a pleasure to have such esteemed guests from across the world, and we wish you a pleasant stay in our country. We are particularly honored to host this high-level meeting on post-conflict building at a time when there are many building and restoring peace to their own countries. It is sobering indeed that despite modern advances in many areas, whether science, communication, and modern management of society, conflicts continue to undermine human progress. And there is no doubt that in our interconnected world, as has been said many times, the impact of conflict goes beyond the borders of the countries in which it occurs, affecting peace, security, and development. This means that peace building requires collaboration between the affected countries, regional organizations, the international community, and other stakeholders. The issue that is central to this meeting is what is needed to rebuild a nation emerging from conflict. We may not be able to address this issue exhaustively in one meeting, but we can make a start and share experiences and lessons learned from countries participating in this discussion. Rwanda is pleased to share our ongoing experiences in recovering from conflict and reconstructing what was a devastated country less than 2 decades ago. One of the biggest lessons we have learned is that there is no magic formula or one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to restoring peace and rebuilding a nation. A country's response to a given situation should be informed by its specific circumstances and context. Success will be determined by the country's practical experience and solutions based on the choices it makes and above all, the genuine aspirations of its people. In offering to share our experience, we are mindful that this is only a modest contribution to the collective search for what works for all of us. Indeed, our efforts are still work in progress, and we continue to learn from both our successes and mistakes and those of others. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, post-conflict nation building is a complex and a challenging task. For Rwanda, it has consisted of rebuilding the state, that is, creating institutions and a functioning government. But it has also meant bringing on board non-state actors, reconstructing the country's social fabric, and establishing mechanisms for social and economic development. In the early phases, we had to do this while dealing with cross-border incursions and atrocities by the same forces who committed the genocide. Our friends from countries recovering from conflict will agree with me that in the immediate aftermath, while everything is a priority, often the resources available are inadequate. In Rwanda's case, we had to restore public order, security, and ensure political stability. The return of refugees who had fled as a result of the genocide was only feasible once this crucial stage of state rebuilding was truly underway. It was then possible to embark on dialogue, national unity and reconciliation, justice, and where appropriate, drawing strongly from and on our culture and traditions. The next level of nation building was agreeing on a constitutional and political dispensation in which every Rwandan had a voice. As a result, a power sharing and consensus building arrangement that is now enshrined in our Constitution evolved. Reconstituting the state necessarily involved reviving our infrastructure, schools, hospitals, water and electricity supply and roads, repairing existing ones and building new ones. It was also crucial to rebuild our human resources capacity by investing in the health and education of our people. Members of our society who had been previously marginalized were brought on board. Women, for example, played a significant role in peace building and continue to make valuable contributions to our country's development. Over the years, we have learned that good, committed leadership at all levels is essential. Leaders should work with the citizens towards transforming the country from a situation of hopelessness to one that brings about positive change. It must also be said that continuous dialogue has gradually fostered a shared national vision. Between 1997 and the year 2000, all Rwandans, political and business leaders, academics, civil society groups, and ordinary citizens participated in consultations that formed our Development Vision 2020, making national dialogue a feature of our national life. This has enabled Rwandans to own the process of setting our priorities, making decisions and designing programs for our development. We have had to find a way to protect the gains we have made and ensure that all Rwandans are able to benefit from the progress achieved. That is why, for example, we put in place institutions that would deter corruption and foster accountability at all levels of our government. These institutions, which include the offices of the Auditor General and Ombudsman, among others, have produced the anticipated results as they work to maintain rules and regulations without fear or favor. This has deterred a culture of impunity and created a sense of shared responsibility for the rule of law among our citizens. Excellencies, distinguished participants, we cannot talk about post-conflict peace building without paying due regard to external support that often comes in at this phase. In my view, proper management of this process is very key. Simply put, nationals are best placed to coordinate financial and technical support because they know what opportunities to seize and constraints to overcome. When countries and their development partners work together, along these lines, the outcome is more positive and sustainable. It is important to avoid the often made assumption that the provider of resources knows better which problems to deal with. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate that peace building is a long and difficult process. Our experience has taught us that no challenge is insurmountable when people have the right attitude, commitment, and are focused on the common good. Africa has been hard hit by conflict, but is now on the path to increased stability. It is time we led the search for solutions. We should seize this opportunity to continue working with the United Nations, Peacebuilding Commission, and other partners to seek appropriate and effective solutions in support of post-conflict countries. In Rwanda, national ownership, consensus, and community-led initiatives have enabled us to make modest progress. If this experience can serve others as well as it has served us, we are happy to share it further. Let me thank the United Nations Peacebuilding Commission and the African Development Bank for working with the government of Rwanda to make this meeting happen. And I thank you all for enriching this discussion by your presence here today. It is now my pleasure to declare this meeting officially open, and I look forward to the discussions that will follow. Thank you very much.
Your words, Mr. President, seem to trigger a thunderstorm. Right. Thank you very much indeed. We can open this now. I think we have about 40 minutes or so. Since we started a little bit late, we'll finish a little bit after 5. But I just want to pick up with something that you said first of all, Mr. President, that a national ownership of your future is something which is absolutely vital. Did you meet any kind of resistance when you tried to do this? Did you feel that as a recipient that the donors were trying to call the shots much more? And Pam, you all have handheld microphones in front of you there, and to try to press the button. I mean, I remember when I was covering the story that you certainly had not disputes, but you certainly had a vigorous exchange of opinions with some NGOs about what they were trying to do in the country and so on. So what were the main challenges when you tried to seize ownership of your own future here?
Well, there are many challenges, and from different kinds of partners. It wasn't confined to NGOs, even governments. The partners partners in this form of governments. We had partners, government partners, we have the NGO partners and so on. And I think it has been historical. It has been a tradition for a long time. The main role was to have people come to a country where there has been devastation caused by war or conflict, or like in our case, even a genocide. And people who really otherwise have very good intentions, I'm sure they want to help. They want to help those who are in need, and they have resources and so on and so forth. But many times the practice has been to overlook the fact that the local situation, the people that are being helped are full of ideas, and people can ably determine their priorities and how to go about them. So there was always this conflict. There was a conflict where you find, in our case, Rwanda, our people needing help, then friends and partners wanting to help, but sometimes saying yes, we want to help, we have the means, we are the ones to... Sometimes I won't say it, but the practice would say it, that they know better what works or should work for us. And in fact, in our case, I will say most of the progress was made because we resisted this kind of thing.
Okay, that's interesting. And President Nkurunziza in Burundi, have you experienced a similar situation whereby, as you try to rebuild your nation, that there are members of the international community who perhaps try to set the agenda for you, and are you meeting a bit of resistance in trying to seize ownership yourself as we speak?
In French.
Wow.
Ça fait fort, hein? Bon, disons que pour un pays post-conflit, nous devons comprendre qu'il y a des situations pendant la guerre, pendant la crise, il y a tout un tas de comportements pour la population qui change. C'est-à-dire que pendant la guerre, les gens ne vont pas souvent au travail, ne produisent plus, n'investissent plus. Et pendant cette période, il y a d'autres associations, d'autres organisations qui viennent pour venir sauver les vies humaines en difficulté. Et avec ce temps où on vient aider les gens en difficulté, à la longue, c'est-à-dire que les gens deviennent presque des mendiants. Ils s'assoient, ils doivent attendre qu'on doit les épauler, qu'on doit les aider. Donc il n'y a pas d'effort pour la prise en charge responsable des intérêts des familles et des intérêts de la nation. C'est-à-dire qu'à un certain moment, on devient presque quelqu'un qui s'assoit là, qui attend qu'on donne, c'est tout. Mais quand il y a la fin de la crise, c'est cette survivance des comportements du passé qui continue à persister. Et ça devient un problème très sérieux. Le problème majeur pour les pays post-conflit, c'est quand il y a donc une impulsion nouvelle de dire aux gens, voilà, il est grand temps que nous pensons déjà à prendre en main la destinée de nos pays. Et c'est très difficile. Il y a des gens qui ont tissé des relations très étroites avec les ONG, avec ceux qui se disaient passer pour des donateurs. Et ça devient très difficile, ça devient presque un combat de tous les jours. Mais nous disons que pour le cas du Burundi, on a vu que petit à petit, quand on a commencé, il y a toujours des résistances. Une ONG vient, il dit moi je continue à faire ceci, parfois même sans même respecter la loi, et ça devient donc difficile. C'est comme si l'ONG devient avoir la main sur la population et l'administration et le gouvernement, et c'est comme si on est toujours à côté tiré. C'est-à-dire donc la restauration de l'autorité de l'État donc doit s'imposer à travers cette nouvelle dynamique vers un état de droit. Un état de droit où tout le monde doit s'aligner dans la loi, y compris même les ONG, y compris les associations. Tout le monde doit comprendre qu'à la fin de la crise, donc nous disons que c'est fini la récréation, nous devons penser à respecter le fonctionnement normal des États à travers donc les lois, la Constitution et les autres lois qui sont donc connexes. Nous disons que pour le cas du Burundi, aujourd'hui, nous disons que nous sommes en train de faire beaucoup de choses. Je vous fais par exemple le cas des travaux communautaires. On a dit voilà, depuis très longtemps, depuis l'indépendance, à un certain moment, parce qu'on a passé cycliquement dans des difficultés, on est toujours commandeur, on disait voilà, on n'a pas construit une école, on n'a pas construit un centre de santé, on n'a pas fait ceci ou cela, mais juste après la crise, quand nous sommes dit voilà, il est grand temps que nous disions que nous sommes capables, nous aussi, on a perdu suffisamment de temps, mais il est grand temps qu'on se mette au travail. Et voilà aujourd'hui, après 3 ans d'expérience, la population mobilisée à travers les travaux communautaires. Je salue également le peuple rwandais qui a initié aussi les travaux communautaires depuis avant nous-mêmes. Nous avons donc presque, nous sommes ressourcés sur le côté du Rwanda. Et on a fait donc un score donc, remarquable. Pendant 3 ans, on a construit 2024 écoles primaires et secondaires sans aucune aide extérieure. Vous voyez? Alors que si on fait la comparaison des écoles primaires et secondaires qui ont été construites depuis l'indépendance jusqu'en 2007, c'est-à-dire 47 ans après l'indépendance, on a vu qu'on a construit 1900 écoles primaires. Mais si on fait la comparaison pendant 3 ans, nous venons de faire, donc on a dépassé catégoriquement les écoles qui ont été construites par la population. Alors, la prise en charge des intérêts donc, propres de la nation, ça doit reposer dans les mains des nationaux. Ils doivent comprendre qu'ils sont capables de faire quelque chose. Et les autres viennent accompagner les initiatives et les programmes des pays. Je vous remercie.
Merci. Thank you. I would like to leave a little bit of time, please, panel, to get some response from the floor. Thank you very much indeed. Prime Minister Soro in Côte d'Ivoire, just to pick up on this point that we're discussing here about the need to tell the international community that you have a national strategy that you have devised yourselves for peace, unity and development, and we'll come in a moment to how you sell it to the population. But with your President Alassane Ouattara, obviously internationally renowned economist who worked at the IMF and the World Bank and so on, is he very aware of the experience here in Rwanda whereby he is using his international contacts and telling people in the international donor community that we wish to seize ownership of how things develop in Côte d'Ivoire?
Merci. Je ne saurais mieux dire que ce que mes aînés, le président Kagame et le président Nkurunziza ont pu dire. Disons que c'est une question importante à laquelle nos nations font face. Ce qui est vrai au Rwanda a été vrai aussi en Côte d'Ivoire. Disons qu'aujourd'hui, l'important, c'est d'arriver à trouver un compromis entre ceux qui veulent aider et ceux qui reçoivent l'aide. Je pense que c'est important. Et je suis parfaitement d'accord avec ce que les aînés ont dit en ce qui concerne l'appropriation. En tout cas, les Ivoiriens, aussi bien les Rwandais que les Burundais, sont suffisamment matures, responsables, connaissent les enjeux de leur propre pays pour souhaiter y apporter par eux-mêmes un certain nombre de solutions. Évidemment, nous disons que la communauté internationale doit l'accompagner, les présidents l'ont bien dit. En ce qui concerne la Côte d'Ivoire, vous l'avez donc évoqué, le président de la République lui-même a été donc dans ces institutions internationales. L'avantage que nous avons, c'est que c'est un économiste, donc rompu à la chose de la finance internationale, qui, bien avant donc d'aller exercer dans ces institutions, était lui-même Premier ministre de la République de Côte d'Ivoire. Donc nous sommes en train actuellement de travailler. Notre situation est encore plus récente et plus fraîche que celle du Rwanda et du Burundi. C'est pourquoi il y a un réel intérêt à ce que nous soyons là. Le président Kagame pourra confirmer, le président Ouattara a insisté pour que nous puissions être ici pour bénéficier, n'est-ce pas, de l'expérience du Rwanda. En regardant les enjeux qu'il y a dans notre pays, nous pensons qu'effectivement, il faut une coopération sud-sud renforcée parce que nos situations sont similaires. Donc la crise qu'il y a eu au Rwanda a bien des similitudes avec ce que nous avons vécu en Côte d'Ivoire. C'est pourquoi de telles rencontres, de telles réunions sont, de mon point de vue, nécessaires pour que nous puissions tirer les avantages de l'expérience des uns et des autres. Donc moi je repartirai enrichi en tout cas en ce qui me concerne donc de toutes les initiatives qui ont été prises ici. Nous avons été particulièrement impressionnés par les audiences que nous avons eues et nous avons bien vu qu'effectivement les populations qui se sont appropriées ont par elles-mêmes fait des propositions se sentent plus responsables et plus engagées dans le développement et l'avenir de leur nation. Merci.
Thank you. And President Kagame, your advice to President Ouattara and Prime Minister Soro is when they're communicating this message that you say that at times they have to be fairly direct and polite, but perhaps candid with international partners. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Oh, good, right, okay.
But I think the most important thing is to recognize that people can work together and make progress.
All right.
Without one having to dictate to the other.
Okay.
So I think this is well emphasized.
And Judy Cheng Hopkins, you spoke when you made your introductory comments about the need for a constructive ties in this partnership between countries and the international organizations. So how can the United Nations, and more specifically the UN Peacebuilding Commission, help communicate this national strategic vision that leaders have for their country at the international level? What is your role specifically at the Peacebuilding Commission? Oh, we need technical assistance.
Thank you. With the Peacebuilding Commission, I described the whole peacebuilding architecture in the UN. I think the advantage is that it provides a platform to bring lessons from other countries and to share with others coming out of conflict. So it's the sort of ideal place to go where these ideas can be discussed very frankly, very openly, and hopefully leading to solutions. But I think one idea, though, you had asked that question before, the Rwanda case. I mean, yes, it's obviously has done all the right things, you know, the vision in the right place, followed up by action, you know, did national reconciliation and everything. But the one thing that strikes me most in the case of Rwanda was the realization so early on that not only did they need aid to rebuild the country, I mean, every country coming out of war needs aid, everybody needs a Marshall Plan. Not only that, but so quickly did they put in place a transparent and accountable structure to actually track that aid, so much so that it brought not only aid, and this is something that always intrigued me, but it brought budget support. Budget support meaning the donor gives the check basically over to the government. And that what intrigued me always, how so early on, when everything was still, you know, broken institutions, broken spirits, what brought the donors to provide this kind of budget support in the millions, in the 20, 50, hundreds of millions. In fact, your country, UK, the average ODA they provide to Rwanda is about 60 to 60% budget support, which is incredible.
It's about £83 million sterling,
exactly,
isn't it?
Of which
directly.
60 to 70% in budget support. So I think the lesson learned there about introducing the transparency early on, because you have to engender that donor confidence. I think for me, that's one lesson that I would really be telling over and over again to other countries.
You said in your comments that you need local solutions as well as strong national ownership, and you also talked about the G7 plus group of fragile and conflict states, and you said we really must have constructive ties with donors. Let me ask you, do you see that there's a lack in this area? Is there a lack of constructive ties between donors? Was it an appeal you were making to people here?
Well, we're starting to see, you know, in Busan, I'm sure you've heard about the lead up to Busan as the Aid Effectiveness Forum, where they call it the New Deal, where the New Deal will be put on the table between the fragile states and their donor countries. And the New Deal embodied in a compact. The compact having a lot of these mutual commitments on both sides to accomplish. I think the conversation is starting anew, and I think with examples from Rwanda and countries like that, one can be, the problem with these discussions is a lot of times when you're very polite, and I'm sure you know this as a journalist, you never get to the bottom line, and politeness and diplomacy usually messes things up, I'm sorry to say.
Why is the conversation starting anew now? What do you identify as the momentum that's behind this peace and state building discussions that we're having now, and also in South Korea and so on? What is pushing this now, do you think?
I think the realization that, the famous Paul Collier quote that 50% of countries emerging from conflict go back to violent conflict within 10 years. I think the realization of this, continuous reoccurrence of conflict and the toll it takes on people's lives, I think has made people really group together now and say, we need new solutions. We can't just go on business as usual. And I think on both sides, on the governments themselves, on the civil societies, and on the donor community, they're realizing that.
Yusuf Wederago from the African Development Bank, you heard President Kagame in his speech talk about the fact that although he wants countries, post-conflict countries and those experiencing conflict, to learn from the lessons of Rwanda, however, there wasn't a one-size-fits-all approach, as he said. Nevertheless, when you spoke, you talked about the fact that there are universal principles that you need to have, strong state institutions and the involvement of the local population and so on. So what do you want to say to President Kagame about the fact that you think that although there isn't a one-size-fits-all, that there are perhaps key common principles that have to be adhered to in order to have successful peace and state building? Tell him.
No, definitely. No, we have to pay our respect. We have to pay our respect to President Kagame and the people of Rwanda. I said that with right leadership and with the willingness, with institution in place, Rwanda had made the difference and make things happen. So that means that the donor cannot make the construction of a country. They cannot dictate the policies. The donors are there to help, but the ownership and the leadership come first from the country. Without this settlement, it is not possible. I said, on the African Development Bank, for example, we don't have a political mandate. Our mandate is to listen to the countries and to try to find a right instrument to help with the leadership of the country. I want to say that Their Excellencies President Kagame, President Nkurunziza, Prime Minister Soro have said, all is there. If you have listened carefully, each situation is particular. But what is important to notice is, in this particularity, there is the leadership and the necessity to reach some consensus to bring the population and the citizen to accept and to go on the same direction. It is in this condition that you can succeed, but it is not the role of the MDBs or the donors. But the donors have to be coordinated to use their complementarities and their specificities.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's just go to the floor. Thank you very much indeed, panel. I think we have Ibrahim Gambari, noted Nigerian statesman who is currently head of UNAMID, working in Darfur, but a man also, you had your dealings, special representative of the Secretary General in Burma. So the question to you is this. You heard the President of Burundi talk about the fact that sadly in his country conflict was made possible because of a lack of good governance. And in your experience, just looking at conflict-ridden societies and so on, this question of good leadership and good governance, just how important it is in either preventing conflict and also in helping to lay strong foundations for peace building? If you could answer that first, please, Mr. Gambari.
Thank you very much, Zainab, for that ambush.
I like to do that.
Well, let me say thank you very much for asking me to make a contribution, and I thank the organizers of this very important gathering. Actually, in my view, peace building entails putting back together or trying to put back together states that have collapsed or state structures that have collapsed. And also, one must add leadership which has become compromised, leadership which has become discredited and collapsed, and a people that have become traumatized. And that is why when I reflect on your question, and I remember a very distinguished visitor to Africa, not long ago in Accra actually, who said what Africa needs for conflict prevention, for progress, is not strong men but strong institutions. But I would say that with respect to conflict prevention, peace building, what we need in the continent is really not just one or the other, not strong men or strong institutions, but both strong men and strong institutions, because we need strong men in terms of leaders with a vision, with a commitment, and I must say with stubbornness, who aggregate the needs of the people, the aspirations, and try to push it forward. At the same time, we also need those structures that will check power, that will promote accountability, and that will promote transparency. So in my view, I would say, therefore, what we need in the continent are structures that work, institutions that work, institutions and structures and leadership that enjoy the support of the people, so that the benefits of the resources of the states are shared much more equitably, not for the pockets of the few, but for the needs of the majority. I'm also Nigerian, and I know that, as you know, that the issue of accountability, transparency, and corruption really are very key. And one of the problems that that country is facing now are traceable to precisely lack of accountability, corruption, and poor governance.
And just on this issue, since you bring up Nigeria, we've seen sadly the latest bout of violence attributed to Boko Haram. How worried are you about your country returning to some really sort of widespread conflict from this kind of threat?
I am extremely worried. This is not the first time that we've had similar situations in that same country, but you had, in those periods, the leadership diagnoses the problem, they collect some of the best brains to address it, and I don't sense the same kind of sense of urgency. For example, one of the ministers sadly said when the United Nations building in Abuja was bombed, he said, well, that's against the United Nations, has nothing to do with Nigeria. To me, that is a misreading of the situation. This is they are expressing some frustrations, and which needs to be addressed. And these frustrations are not religious, in my view, or not primarily religious, but they are social, disenfranchisement, youth unemployment, all the things that needs to be addressed seriously.
And when you heard President Paul Kagame talk about the fact that part of his strategy for peace building was to ensure that there were very effective poverty reduction strategies, and also we heard from the President of Burundi about schools and so on, how important is this to ensure that you do have effective state building? When you look at Nigeria, obviously you've had the long-running dispute in the Niger Delta with the movement for the emancipation of the Niger Delta, obviously causing issues there. I mean, people say, look, Nigeria is the 8th biggest producer of oil and gas, and yet 70% of its population live in poverty. And so how much of a threat is poverty and the absence of prosperity to effective nation building?
As a matter of fact, it's worse than people realize, because I think in the next 20 years, the population of Nigeria rising at more than 3% per annum will be, and the cities will be overcrowded, and the opportunities will simply not be there. And I will even suggest that if Niger Delta were a different country from Nigeria, if the northern part of Nigeria were different, there will be not in the third world, but in the fourth or fifth world. And that kind of inequality within the country, geographically, and inequality in terms of the haves and the have-nots, if they are not addressed, then God forbid we're heading for serious trouble in that in that country. And the sad thing is, you have people like me trying to bring peace to Darfur and elsewhere, and yet we have serious problems at home that also needs to be attended to.
What's your population? Is about 165 million, is it?
And growing at 3% per annum. But I must say also, in terms of Rwanda, that a country that has been let down by the international community in the 1990s, I was a member of the Security Council then, ironically is now contributing troops, is the second largest contributor of troops to try to prevent the same kind of tragedies in Darfur and to try to bring about peace building in that part of your country.
You take us to... You take us to Sudan, and in fact I think that there is a representative from South Sudan from the National Coordination Office, is that right? Moses? Are you here? Yes, hello. Hi. South Sudan, of course, a country which a lot of eyes are on at the moment. And I think you heard from our panel a couple of the Prime Minister, Guillaume Soro, talking about the fact that even though conflict, and also in Burundi where you've got the activities of militias, even where conflict is still ongoing through the activities of militias, which is the case sadly in South Sudan as we've seen quite recently, you nevertheless still have to put measures in place for peace building and state building. Just give us your reflections, please, from your perspective.
To talk about South Sudan, it's a very complex situation. We have the peace, we have the independence, but the arms are still on the wrong place. There are still issues between the borders. So, and we came up with the vision is there, the aid strategy is there, but without the peace, without the peace at the border, when there is a war in Darfur, war in southern Kordofan, war in Blue Nile, it makes it very difficult for South to because with the surrounding in war, it doesn't help the South to start off. So I'm not a politician, but my sense of issues now is that even if you can have the leadership who has a vision to move forward in that environment of different wars in the Sudan, because the country is still, you call it one. In that environment, I think we can start off very effectively. So that is what I can.
And you're obviously staying for the whole gathering now, and you heard what President Kagame in particular said about the need for coordination in order to get better aid effectiveness. And I'm very struck by the words of Bill Clinton, the Special Envoy, UN Special Envoy to Haiti, when he talked about the activities of the international community in Haiti and said, in the name of God, tell us what you're doing, how you're doing it, and where you're doing it, because there were just so many uncoordinated activities. And there are those to say South Sudan is a prime example of just how that is happening. So presumably you are going to be listening with great interest to the lessons learned in this regard.
As we start off with the agreement in 2005, South Sudan was, the relief was the game. But when we started, we came up with the aid strategy. We were talking with our partners in terms of mechanism of coordinating the assistance, because what we are getting is project and program support. But we are telling, at the moment, we revised our strategy. We have the development plan, the priorities are there. We are telling our partners that now that for a country to take off, we cannot continue having program and projects. The issue of ownership and leadership and effectiveness, the sovereignty of the country will not be realized until we start to strengthen the institutions of government, and we take ownership of some of the projects. That will be the time our people will also know that we are leading and owning the process.
Okay, thank you. And I know that the government of Rwanda. Yes, do you want to say something?
Zainab, I want to say something much broader than that, but which probably would have been itching to ask you to give me. You see, the issue of ownership, I think, should be contextualized properly. It is not just entirely a chicken and egg issue. We have to start at some point. You see, donors would be right to say, no, we can't just give money blindly to a country when a country is showing weak institutions or signs of corruption. There is likelihood that money will be lost. And so on that point, the donors will be right to say, we just can't put money anyhow. So that puts the onus on us to actually merit being given money and manage it, which brings about ownership. So ownership comes along with showing practically that you have actually that responsibility. You can exercise that responsibility. If you are given money, you will not use it wrongly, and so on and so forth, which you can even put mechanisms in place to show that money goes where it should go and does what it is supposed to. At the same time, this money that is given to us, those who need the money, not only should we be managing it with accountability and responsibility, we should actually be doing it in a certain way that we are leading to a situation where maybe we need less of this money and not more. Meaning you are actually building, you are breaking the cycle of dependence. For me, this is very key. Now, something else. We are operating in a very complicated, again, situation, where our partners, of course, even currently, the current situation proves it all. It has been proven that Africa is not entirely a basket case. It's a continent. Africa is a continent of resources, both human and material. And today, this is the region that shows there is economic growth more than any other part of the world. Now, while other parts of the world, Europe, America, are going through this crisis that we are seeing, I think it should be understood that continued growth of the economy of Africa and development of Africa actually works very well for those economies as well. So investing in Africa, therefore, should not just always be seen in the context of charity. It should be seen in the context of investing where there are high returns for the investments being made.
Enlightened self-interest.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you. All right, in our remaining time, I just want to seek some comments, brief comments, please, from the floor. We have some countries here very, very crucial in post-conflict, this post-conflict dialogue. Sierra Leone, I believe we have the Foreign Minister of Sierra Leone here. Is that right? Yes, if you could make a brief comment. Also Guinea-Bissau, if you would like to make some brief comments, just focusing on this issue of the challenges of leadership in post-conflict societies. Please, no, have you got a prepared speech there, or no? No. Oh, good, okay, please.
Thank you very much. Let me first of all start by thanking the President, the people and government of Rwanda, and the African Development Bank for organizing this very important meeting. I want also to extend to the President my President's regret for not being able to attend. And I want also to thank the government and people of Rwanda for the hospitality extended to us since our arrival here. Having gone through, I see a lot of similarities between Sierra Leone and the Republic of Rwanda, particularly that the peace process has been done in a more orderly manner. I want to congratulate Rwanda for the achievements so far and to say that the issue of ownership and leadership has also been very central in terms of Sierra Leone. We embarked upon our peace-building consolidation, fortunately with a very good leadership which was committed to resolving the issues which had actually brought the conflict. And in the process, we have had 2 elections which produced 2 presidents. The first one did with the earlier settlement of the peace-building process, and the present leadership is continuing with a very good commitment and leadership. I share the view by His Excellency Paul Kagame that the question of ownership in terms of post-conflict country is a delicate issue. One, at the beginning, where the country has been destroyed, the country is weak and poor, the international community coming to offer help usually take advantage of particularly the absence of governmental authority, and working through various NGOs, they come to the country to assume to give us help, but sometimes without complying with our local laws. And in terms of giving aid, I believe it is first necessary to find out from the person you are giving aid what he requires for the aid, how the aid should be utilized. But in many cases at the beginning, the processes are made in the various homes of the NGOs, and they come into the country and impose those conditions. And because of the fragile nature of the state at that time, it has been difficult to resist the imposition of such policies. But as time has gone on, we have been able to strengthen our institutions, and we are now beginning to partner with our donor partners who are coming to help. We now want to really exercise ownership of the processes. We want to also ensure that the aid which is offered is actually channeled through our own priorities. Well, that is one of the factors that normally do not help, where we decide, for example, that these are our priorities. So any aid coming should be passed through those provisions we have made. For example, recently we had a disagreement with the donors. We have realized that we need to embark upon a very a big program of road reconstruction covering the whole country. And the donors do not see that very much as a necessary public necessity. But we believe that making roads all over the country will help, not only for the movement of goods, but it will also facilitate economic activity. And we decided that we will fund this particular project through revenue generated from our own resources. And we therefore decided to proceed in spite of the donor objection. Currently, we are having discussions with the IMF and the World Bank over this particular issue. But we believe that this is our own priority, and we see it beneficial to the country.
Thank you. You kept on avoiding my eye, didn't you? Thank you very much indeed for giving us that very important contribution from Sierra Leone, a country that sadly has seen a great deal of suffering. Haiti, would you like to comment at all, just briefly, on your experiences?
Oui, I would like to speak French.
Yeah, I'll just get my headphones.
Oui, en Haïti, nous sommes en train d'expérimenter une nouvelle approche dans la reconstruction de l'État avec les donneurs. Et bon, il est vrai que nous étions dans un conflit politique chronique lorsque nous avons eu un séisme qui a détruit toutes les institutions du pays. Donc, la communauté internationale s'est réunie et on a mis en place une structure entre le gouvernement et la communauté internationale pour voir comment on peut coordonner l'aide internationale. Et cette structure est co-présidée par le président, enfin l'ancien président, William Jefferson Clinton, et le premier ministre haïtien. Donc, il y a eu beaucoup de promesses et malheureusement, les promesses tardent à se concrétiser. Et ce qui crée davantage de méfiance maintenant de la part des politiciens et du peuple haïtien. Et méconnaissant les mécanismes de décaissement des fonds, et trouve que ça prend trop de temps. Et on s'aperçoit aussi que souvent on reprochait au gouvernement d'être peu transparent. On se rend compte maintenant que les donneurs ne sont pas aussi transparents. Donc ce qui crée une situation vraiment c'est une situation qui doit évoluer parce que le mandat de la commission a pris fin et ce mois-ci, on doit renouveler ce mandat, mais les parlementaires sont très réticents parce que les résultats ne se sont pas concrétisés sur le terrain.
Merci, thank you. Thank you very much. Guinea, or would you like to make any comments at all on the challenges of leadership at all? No? Sorry, Guinea, no? Would you like to make some comments? No? It's not compulsory. Yeah? If you, on just what you've heard our panel...
Pas de commentaire sur le leadership, parce que nous avons une situation particulière. Notre pays a connu 2 régimes assez difficiles. Maintenant, après les dernières élections démocratiques, nous sommes confrontés au problème de la réconciliation nationale. Et le poids des politiciens est devenu très lourd, si bien que le chef de l'État a pensé que, des chefs religieux, des sages pourraient indiquer une voie concernant cette réconciliation. C'est dans ce sens-là que le grand imam de Conakry et moi-même, nous avons été désignés comme co-présidents de la commission de réflexion sur la réconciliation nationale. Donc notre problème est à ce niveau. D'abord, comment mettre le Guinéen sur le chemin de la réconciliation et sur le chemin du travail. Voilà.
For those of you speaking from the floor, please, I should have said actually, do introduce yourselves and your titles if necessary. I know Foreign Minister of Sierra Leone, Deputy Foreign Minister of Haiti, is that right? Yes, you were. And Sir from Guinea, you are? Oh, never mind. Okay. Sorry, pardonnez-moi, parce que je ne parle très bien en français. Anybody else? Guatemala, I don't know if you want to make any comments. You've recently just had a new president elected in the past few days. Is it President Molina, incoming president, and a country, of course, that's also still suffering? I mean, maybe you'd want to address this issue that was brought up from our panel about the need for strong state institutions, because Guatemala, of course, often criticised for not having very strong state institutions. Brief comments, please.
Well, thank you for offering me the floor. I think I would like to react to what I've seen here in Rwanda in the last 24 hours.
Could you just
But
introduce
I'd rather
yourself?
not do it in a 4-minute statement. I'd rather speak tomorrow morning,
Okay.
which is more relevant for the topic of tomorrow morning.
Okay.
I just would like to say, though, that I'm very impressed because when one sees the magnitude of what happened here in 1994, which we all know about, but was brought home this morning when we visited the memorial, one would expect that the consequences of such a major tragedy would last for generations. But here we are, less than 20 years after the fact, and seeing what, by all accounts, has to be a success story. And I would like to address that a little more tomorrow from the vantage point of my own country, which also is a post-conflict country, with many differences and some commonalities. But that's not something I would like to address in 2 minutes.
Okay,
Thank
sure.
you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. And I'm sorry, I didn't ask you to introduce yourself, but if you would just do that retrospectively. Sorry.
I'm sorry, too. I'm the permanent representative of Guatemala to the United Nations.
There you are. You have it. Can I just elicit some brief comments from the floor? Talking about leadership, though, we also heard from our speakers about not only the importance of leaders leading from the top, but also the necessity of them engaging the country at large in devising a common strategy to go forward. Are there any members of civil society organisations or women advancement groups? We heard Judy Chang Hopkins speak about the need for gender advancement, again something that Rwanda has a very good record on. Any civil society organisations want to make a comment? I've subdued you all into submission or something, clearly. No? A donor nation, perhaps? Switzerland, you catch my eye there. If you introduce yourself, and maybe some comments from a donor's perspective.
Well, thank you very much, and the next time I don't wear a bow tie anymore. I'm actually Gerd Rosenthal's colleague. I'm the Swiss ambassador to the United Nations, and that function I also am chairing the Peacebuilding configuration on Burundi. I just would like to make 2 brief comments. I fully agree on this relationship between leadership and ownership, both on the international but also on the national level. I think that's something I think we should really be aware about as donors also. And what President Kagame has said, I think is really very true. We should try to give as much ownership as possible to the countries under consideration, but at the same time this obliges the countries to show responsibility. I think there's a clear interrelation between ownership and responsibility. And actually, I'm of course not speaking for my colleagues on the other configurations, but that's exactly what we're trying to do as a peace-building configuration. We are, I think, the advisors and the advocates of a country, and I compare the situation of one sitting in a boat. We are not the captains of the boat. The countries under considerations are the captains of the boat. We are the ones who are showing where to set the sails and where maybe obstacles on the course lay ahead, that the boat is not crashing. That's what we're doing, and that's what we should continue to do. So that's the international part. I think the national one, I think leadership and ownership on the national level are also interrelated in the sense that there is a top-down leadership necessary, as President Kagame has shown, but this doesn't go without a close ownership of the national population, which needs to be closely consulted. And this has been done, for instance, I applaud Burundi for that in the strategic framework on peace consolidation, where you mentioned before the NGOs and the national society, which has been closely consulted and been part of this process. So it's really top-down and bottom-up at the same time, and that's one of the main lessons we should retain from our own experiences. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. And just, yes, oh, we have I didn't see your country. Where is it? She waved it up so quickly that I missed it. Do introduce yourself, please.
I'm asking to stand. Although that Zainab, it doesn't make much difference whether I stand or I sit.
You're giving me some company.
Thank you. Thank you, Zainab. I'm representing an intergovernmental organization with a long name taller than me. It's International Conference on the Great Lakes Region, but that brings all these countries, all these leaders, the post-conflict countries, but also the peace-building, peacemaking countries. These are 11 countries of the Great Lakes region, including Rwanda, Burundi, Angola, down to Zambia, Central African Republic. I know there are peace-building commission members here. They represent some of the countries that I represent. I'm Liberata Mulamula, Ambassador and the Executive Secretary. This organization is based in Bujumbura, Burundi, and I'm speaking under the protection of my host president, Pierre Nkurunziza. Zainab, I don't want to make any statement, but I wanted to thank the President Kagame and the government of Rwanda for organizing this event. I think it was long time that it's high time that we had this gathering. We know those in New York are doing a brilliant job, but then as the ambassador of Guatemala said, visiting today the memorial site, I know in the conscience of your heart, in the silence of your heart, we can all live here and say never again. And President Nkurunziza said it, we should rise to say never again. But what I want to say, and it's only my plea to our leaders, we have had wonderful leaders. I come from Tanzania. You hosted one of a very big event like this, organized by Mo Ibrahim. We have had wonderful leaders. We have had Mwalimu, and now he's being referred as late. But my plea, Zainab, through you, to our leaders, they should write. They should write, because I don't know any of our leaders those who have passed on, those who are still present. We would like to have our children, our grandchildren, to read, to be able to read what our leaders have done. Rather than always in schools, we make reference to others. We have our leaders here. So, President Kagame, I want to plead to you, you need to write. You have done a lot.
I think that's a wonderful, I was going to say conclusion from the floor, but African Union and African Development Bank wish to speak very briefly. My sister from Tanzania, thank you very much indeed. Some brief comments, because we're coming to the end of our session, if you introduce yourself.
Yeah, no, thank you. My name is El Gassimwan. I'm the Director of the EU Peace and Security Department. I would like, of course, to thank the Rwandan authorities for inviting us to this meeting. But I would like to make a contribution, and I fully agree with what has been said on the issue of ownership and leadership. It's absolutely crucial. But I wanted to bring another angle to the issue of post-conflict reconstruction. It has to do with the need for African solidarity. Often we speak of relationship between African countries and non-African countries, the non-African countries providing support to African countries. But there is another dimension in which African countries help each other in addressing their post-conflict problems. In the context of the African Union, we do have what we call an AU policy on post-conflict reconstruction and development. And one of the elements of the policy is to foster African solidarity. And as part of that process, we dispatch assessment missions to countries emerging from conflict. As we are meeting here, we have a mission in Côte d'Ivoire since yesterday in actual fact to deal with issues of post-conflict. And on the basis of the assessment, organize what we call a solidarity conference in which African countries make pledges and contribute to post-conflict in other African countries. And that pledge is not necessarily a financial one. It could also be a pledge in terms of expertise. And indeed, the Rwandan expertise, or experience rather, the Burundian experience, the Ivorian experience could be of help to other African countries. So I wanted to bring that angle. It's not only a process linking Africa with the rest of the world, it's also an internal African process in which African countries help each other. Thank you.
When did you start this?
We started this in 2006. when the policy was adopted in Banjul, the Gambia.
Okay.
We have since sent delegations to Liberia, Sierra Leone, Burundi, DRC, Cote d'Ivoire, Central African Republic, and next year, in February, hopefully, we'll be launching what we call an African Initiative, Solidarity Initiative, which will start with a conference bringing together all the African countries to see to which extent they can support fellow African countries.
No criticism of you personally, but with all respect, somebody might have said you might have done this before 2006. But anyway.
Well, I can answer to that.
Briefly.
Briefly, by saying what happened, the policy, in fact, the need for a policy was agreed upon in Tripoli in 2005 in view of the progress made in resolving African conflicts, especially the Sudan one. And African head of states felt that there was need, once we have resolved conflict, there was need also to move to the next phase, which is to consolidate the gains made. So you have to look at it in the context of the progress made in dealing with conflict situation. Thank you.
Acceleration needed. Good. African Development Bank, final contribution from the floor, unless anybody's really busting a gut to speak? No? Okay.
Thank
if
you.
You introduce yourself, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Zainab. My name is Gabriel Negatu. I'm the regional director for East Africa. So Burundi and Rwanda are the two parts of the countries I cover. I should like to pose a question, and hopefully President Kagame and President Nkurunziza could respond to. It's about the issue of leadership and institutions. If you look at the Rwanda experience over the years, in my view, there are three pillars that have underpinned what Rwanda has been able to achieve. And these are visionary leadership, capable institutions, and indigenous capacity. I think Rwanda has successfully put in place these three pillars that continue to underpin this progress. Now, the question in my mind and that I would like to hear from is, at what point in this post-conflict continuum does leadership and institutions overlap? Let me be a bit more specific. The current leadership in Rwanda, President Kagame and his team, their biggest legacy will be to put in place institutions that will outlive them, to put in place institutions that will ensure that whoever comes next, Rwanda will never go back to where it was. Now, within that framework then, when does leadership become less important and institutions become more important? And since I have the Swiss ambassador next to me, let me for a second take Switzerland as an example. We all know around the world that Switzerland is an excellent example of democracy. Elections, the whole thing. But how many of us around this room know the name of the president of Switzerland? Not many of us. Yeah, how many of us know they even have a president? Yeah, much less the name.
I have a hard time myself.
Yeah. So at some point, institutions overtake leadership. But in a post-conflict transition, yes, leadership is critical at the early stages, but then that transition has to occur. And I'd like to hear the views of the two presidents.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Gabriel, from the ADB. And panel, if you could just incorporate that question in your final comments. I suppose it's really this issue of sustainability. How can you ensure that any efforts that you make look beyond you?
It's a very important issue raised. But at the same time, it's also important to note that the case he has given of Switzerland probably is the only one, even in that part of the world, which tends to claim high ground on issues of governance and building institutions and so forth. So, which may be an indication in itself that it is not as easy as is said. But we should not lose the importance of the point he has made. It's a very critical one. But at the same time, it is important to underscore the fact that when we are talking about institutions, we are also talking about people. So leadership maybe has different forms or different expressions. And in fact, it relates to one point which I wish to have made earlier, that putting in place these things we call institutions, like I spelled out even in my speech when we were talking about Ombudsman, the Auditor General, and so on and so forth. You see, there are places where they have them, but where they don't work. So it is not just important to have them, it is important to make them work. And what makes them work is the people. It still brings in that leadership. The leadership, in fact, leadership should not be defined just as at the top, in terms of the president, the prime minister. No, leadership is an expression at many levels. So why, for example, the case of Switzerland works, and which would be ideal for all of us to aspire to and probably to achieve, it's because institutions have been built to the extent that people in these institutions actually do what they are supposed to do. So, in our case, let me give an example of Rwanda now. These things that happen, the progress that has been made, reflects leadership at different levels, but also reflects the fact that institutions are gaining strength every year. It couldn't, all these things you have seen in this country, I don't know how much you have seen or even what you have seen. But I'm saying what has happened could not have happened just because of the president alone. It is because of the president and other people, other leaders, and the other fact of involving the citizens, which I talked about. So there is buy-in, broad buy-in by the people, by leaders at different levels, whether you look at the mayors of the districts, different leaders have played different roles in their own way, at their own levels, and the totality of it is the progress that is made. So at which level is a complicated answer, because it is kind of a gray area. It's a gray area between the interaction of leaders as of specific people playing their responsibilities, and institutions is that critical mass that has to be reached in terms of understanding of the general populace, including these citizens and leaders at different levels, having this practice and culture of doing things the way they must be done. Okay. So there is a very close interplay between individual leaders and institutions. And in fact, very close to what Gambari said. When people said we need strong institutions, we don't, well, there is a bit of semantics in this. Again, it comes to the issue of, are these institutions we are talking about made of people? Or they are institutions that have no face of individuals? No, it should be above. If we put them in order of priority, institutions, because they are broad, should come first. They should be stable, they should be long-term, and they should provide a platform where individual leaders come and go, but the institutions stay so that leaders, new leaders will come in, old ones will get out. But you are still talking about people. So you need people who are doing what they are supposed to do, playing a role in these institutions. So we need strong institutions, we need leaders, whether you call them strong or, I don't know, it's an issue of words. But you need good leaders, certainly. Okay. Yes, not weak ones, because when they are weak leaders, they will weaken the institutions.
Okay. President Kagame, I will come to you for the very end. The very final word will come to you, but I would like to now just get some final comments from our panel, please. President Pierre Nkurunziza of Burundi, you may wish to pick up on this point. It's essentially the point of sustainability.
Je tiens donc à remercier, à féliciter mon collègue, que je qualifie aussi de grand frère, parce qu'il est plus avancé plus que moi par rapport aux expériences du passé, de la conduite d'un État. Je le respecte très sérieusement. Et je me dis que ce qu'il vient de dire, je n'ai rien à ajouter. Et je suis tout à fait d'accord. Deuxièmement, il y a quelque chose. Deuxièmement, il y a autre chose qui est très important, qui a été posé comme le leadership et les institutions. Et surtout, je me place dans un cadre d'un pays ou des pays post-conflit. Je classe cela donc sous forme de changement de mentalité. Nous devons comprendre que pour être en bon leadership, c'est d'abord comprendre que nous sommes là, vous êtes là pour servir les autres. Ça doit être donc compris comme cela. En bon leadership, il doit comprendre que l'autre, qui est dans l'autre institution, vous êtes là pour servir, parce que si vous n'êtes pas là pour servir, c'est-à-dire que vous avez déjà perdu les repères de votre donc, cadre institutionnel. En tant que chef de l'État, en tant que ministre, en tant que parlementaire, nous devons comprendre que tous, pour ce qui est du leadership, nous sommes tous complémentaires. C'est cela qui a toujours manqué au niveau des principes qui guident donc en bon leadership. La complémentarité est une chose très importante. Vous êtes là en tant qu'institution législative, vous êtes là pour épauler le président, pour épauler le gouvernement. Le gouvernement, il est là pour aussi épauler l'Assemblée nationale, le Sénat, et toutes les institutions là au service de la population. Okay. C'est cela donc qui est très important. Je dis que le changement de mentalité vient nous montrer que là où il y a un bon leadership, comme l'a dit le président, ce n'est pas uniquement au niveau du président, c'est à partir de la base. C'est à partir de la base que nous devons partager ce que l'autre a de meilleur plus que vous, mais donc ce que vous avez de meilleur est aussi complémentaire pour l'autre. Donc nous disons que vraiment, question de leadership et question de complémentarité, de gestion des institutions, c'est de comprendre comme étant des institutions de leadership et complémentaires. J'ai besoin d'un leadership au niveau de l'Église, j'ai besoin d'un leadership au niveau d'une association commerciale, j'ai besoin d'un leadership au niveau d'une organisation des agriculteurs. Nous sommes tous complémentaires et quand on sait qu'on est complémentaires, on s'apprend l'un sur l'autre.
Thank you very much indeed. Rest of the panel, please. Presidential prerogatives have been going on here. I did ask for concluding comments for just a minute, please. So please, if you would observe that, just some final comments on the importance of state institutions and leadership and sustainability. Prime Minister of Côte d'Ivoire. Prime Minister Soro, briefly, if you would. Thank you.
Je voudrais simplement dire que je me rallie aux réponses qui ont été déjà données. Alors, mais je voulais juste dire quelques mots à la suite du président Paul Kagame sur l'exemple de la Suisse qui a été donné ici. C'est vrai que j'avoue que moi aussi je ne connais pas le nom du président de la Suisse. Et après ce séminaire, on va s'informer. Mais ce que je veux dire, c'est que ça pose la question de savoir si la Suisse est le modèle achevé de la démocratie. Parce que la Suisse est une démocratie. Mais par contre, les États-Unis aussi, si on considère que c'est peut-être le modèle achevé de la démocratie, en ce moment, les États-Unis, on connaît le nom du président. Si c'est la France, en France, on connaît le nom du président. Donc, je veux dire que, effectivement, aujourd'hui, ce qui est important, le président Kagame l'a dit, c'est que l'Afrique est en train d'expérimenter un modèle. L'Afrique a savoir à trouver là-dedans. Et je pense que c'est à nous de trouver le compromis entre ces institutions et les personnes qui les animent. Merci.
Merci. Put us out. Is it President Klaus of Switzerland? Is it Klaus?
Madame Calmire is president now. She's Madame Calmire is president now.
What?
Madame Micheline Calmire is president now. But just one sentence, maybe. Just one sentence.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, we have now been named several times as a model, but just not forget that we have been living in peace for over 200 years.
Okay.
And we all, especially as Western countries, we all expect countries like Rwanda, Burundi, and others emerging out of conflict and transitioning into peace in no time. You know?
Okay.
How could we expect you to do what in 10 years or 20 years, what we have been trying 200 years? So
we'll carry on these discussions tomorrow. Judy Cheng-Hopkins, your final message, please, this afternoon. I know you're going to be talking again tomorrow, so save something to say tomorrow, but just final comment for today.
Hello?
Yeah.
Well, since it's getting late, maybe a controversial point to wake people up. I'd like to go back to national ownership. Lately, I've been hearing the term used a lot, so it's become like a cliche, I think. And as all cliches go, they lose meaning, or at least they mean different things to different people, which is a tragedy, because we've seen in the case of Rwanda, true national ownership is the crux to success. It's the very crux of what drives everything and makes things work. And obviously, as we've discussed, is that vision, is that confidence. And for me, the litmus test is, if you're so confident in your vision, okay, it's subject to change, of course. That litmus test is the ability to say no to a donor when he or she doesn't meet your vision. I think that, for me, that's the litmus test.
But a revolutionary thought from you at the United Nations. Thank you. And Yusuf Wadrago from the African Development Bank, you open the session. Please, your brief comments, please.
Non,
concluding.
Madame Badawi, moi je n'ai plus de commentaires à faire parce que les chefs d'État et de gouvernement l'ont déjà dit. Moi je crois que les institutions et la démocratie doivent se construire dans la durée. Ce qui compte, c'est de chercher la non-réversibilité et cela se fait dans la citoyenneté. Il n'y a pas un exemple unique de démocratie. Il y a des modèles de démocratie. L'essentiel, c'est que le peuple accepte un consensus avec les divers niveaux de leadership, c'est-à-dire dans la chaîne, avec aussi la responsabilité. Parce que les sanctions sont là, dans une démocratie. Il y a le contrôle populaire, il y a la justice. C'est ça qui fonde une démocratie non réversible. Et je crois que c'est dans ce sens-là qu'il faut saluer les efforts et les succès qui ont été obtenus par certains pays, dont on a cité les noms tout à l'heure, dont le Rwanda, et s'inscrit dans la réflexion que le chef d'État vient de faire, à savoir qu'il faut continuer de travailler. Il n'y a pas une fin à cela. C'est-à-dire les succès d'hier sont de nouveaux défis aujourd'hui. Ce qui compte, c'est la souveraineté du peuple qui s'exprime de manière dynamique et continuelle. Voilà.
Okay, thank you. And President Paul Kagame, please, in just 1 minute. Mr. Wadrago there saying what worked yesterday may not work today or tomorrow. Yes, we're learning from Rwanda and there are many positive lessons, but just final point, be honest, there are also perhaps the odd setbacks or challenges that you feel Rwanda could still do better on in its post-conflict peace building.
Absolutely. There will not be any perfect situation. There will be ups and downs, and people have to have systems and institutions that keep correcting the course as you move on. This will be for any country. It will be for Rwanda. It will be for any developed country. People keep meeting setbacks, have overcome them, and move on. But let me make two last points. One, I do not believe that there are people of one country who are better than people of another country. No. Each country and its people have the ability to do what is good for them and what fits in the universal values that we all respect. That's one. Having said that, the second issue is each country and each people of any country should always strive to do the right thing, and they are capable of doing that. But I will not agree with the fact that you have one set of people in one country doing better than people in another country. Zero.
Thank you, President Kagame. Thank you very much indeed, President Kagame, President Nkurunziza, also Prime Minister Soro, Judy Cheng-Hopkins from the UN, and Youssef Ouedraogo. Thank you very much indeed for this introductory session to our meetings. More discussion, more